Hello, friends, and welcome to the Optimized Advisor Podcast, where we focus on optimizing the well-being and best practices of insurance and financial professionals today. On this show, our objective is to help you optimize your life, optimize your profession, and learn from other optimized advisors. I'm your host, Scott Heinela. We hope you enjoy the show. Bill McBride, Philly boy.
Scott.
Welcome to the studio today.
Good morning.
You are an interesting human being.
Yeah?
Yes. Not just a financial advisor, and co-host of Dollars and Sensibilities.
Correct.
Podcast, which I've watched a handful of them. I listen. You don't necessarily watch. I guess you can.
Well, we haven't done the video yet.
Okay. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I watched the ones, listened to the one on bonds. I listened to the one on, it had the greatest tagline, which is what caught my eye. Darn it. What
Wasn't the first one, the allegory of the cave, was it?
No. That was good too.
That was rough.
A good title. This was another one with a witty title. Danielle will pull it up. It was, I think, episode 5, 6. It was early on too. Anyway, we can come back to that. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited, Scott. This place is so impressive.
So you fit the mold, by the way, of an optimized advisor, and that's why you're here today.
I'm trying
to get to share your story. You get to share your story and, glean some wisdom on the listeners today.
I hope so.
I do also appreciate you sharing some time to talk about your history, your background, and how you were raised, which, it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
No, but whose is?
Right. Yeah. Everybody, it seems like it on paper, maybe, you went to school.
To you it is. That's the interesting part about it. It's like, to me, it's my upbringing was my upbringing. It seems just kind of not mundane, but it's the way that it was. And it seemed normal at the time. And then when maybe you reflect back or other people look at it, you're like, there's some pretty interesting things going on in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was kind of writing out and thinking of my life story, I was like, I did do that. That was fun.
Like a perfect example, a 9 years old, you started your first job.
Yes.
You are a hustler, a grinder, a worker, still to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah? I mean, that's your thing.
That was, I remember the moment in Kmart, right? And I'm sitting there.
So tell me what happened in Kmart.
So I'm at Kmart. It's November, I'll say 1982. And my mom goes, I was buying Christmas presents for my 3 sisters, and my mom said, what do you want to get them?
Yeah.
And something just clicked, and I just went, well, I don't understand, right? Like Santa Claus gives my sisters gifts. Santa Claus gives me gifts. You give your daughters gifts. You give me gifts. How are you paying for it? And it's from me, right? I didn't equate the math there. And she said, well, Billy, there's things. When you get home, talk to your father about working, right? And, I went home and I said, Dad, I want to buy my sister's Christmas presents, right? Mm-hmm. That are actually from me, right? And he said, well, you go to work and then you work and you make money and then that's what you spend your money on Christmas gifts. At that point, I think he wasn't talking mortgages and electric bills for a 9-year-old.
Right.
But, the concept was there. You work and you make money. Fortunately.
Trading cards, candy. Yeah. Gifts for sisters.
Exactly, right? And or BMX bikes at the time, right? And and he worked for the Philadelphia Daily News, and the Philadelphia Eagles played at Veterans Stadium, and they had this program where they got 25 kids, and they brought them in from all over, and you just sold newspapers. And it was, I think, 15 cents for a newspaper. It was an 8-page special edition. Just, every Eagles game, every Eagles home game, and from that point on, until I graduated high school, 9 years, I went to every Eagles home game and I sold newspapers. I learned real quickly, though, right, that you can't just make money off of the simple task at hand, right? So about the third game in, I'm already equating 7.5 cents per paper I make, right? So it's cold in Philly too, right? It's December,
yeah.
So
all through the football season. Colder and colder as it gets.
Brutal, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you've got to you need change. Like nobody's giving you a credit card, right? At that point, so you got change. So you cut the fingers off the gloves and all that to get the change. And people are giving you $1 back then for a 15-cent paper, and you got an 85-cent tip. You're rich, right? But then I discovered somebody gave me a ticket to the game. And I went, Dad, what do I do with this? They were like, they had an extra ticket. It was freezing cold. And he's like, well, you're 9. You're not going to the game by yourself. He just kind of turned around and he said, look what the scalpers are doing.
Selling tickets.
I started scalping tickets, and people would give me tickets
wow.
to the game. So I made the bulk of my money with selling the newspapers, but then it was, scalping tickets.
You're in there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't get into the pretzel gig. That was a little too illegal for me, but yeah.
That's very, very interesting. And then it hasn't stopped. Many jobs since.
No, I mean, I kept that job even through high school as I went to work, Burger King, KFC, delis.
A golf shop.
The golf
and
shop.
never had picked up a golf club before.
No.
Which is so interesting to me. It's like, I guess a job's a job and you learn as you go, right? That's how we all do, right? Trial by fire. And someone comes in and says, hey, I'm looking for a new driver. And you're like.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference between a passion and a paycheck, right?
Right.
And I had no passion for golf, but I was out here for 3 months living on this guy's sofa, and I literally, Scott, I couldn't get a job at Penguins slinging yogurt, and I was going out with a suit and tie on.
Right.
Like at 18 years old trying to get a job. Took the tie off, and a block away from the apartment that I was staying at was a Roger Dunn golf shop, and I walked in there. They took a liking to me, called me back the next. I said, if this place doesn't work out, I'm getting in my car and driving back to Philly, regrouping, saving some more money because I'm done. Yeah. And they called me the next day and they're like, I was like, how much? And they said $6 an hour. I almost lost my mind, right? I'm like, yes. So cashier. Really easy job. You don't have to know golf.
You weren't really selling as a cashier. You just had a job.
No, but within 6 months, that's the thing. Like you see, if you get into a position at any organization, right, you see all the different facets, right? You see who's making more money, who's doing something more fun, who's doing something fun and making the money, who owns the business, right? And what are they doing right, and how are they managing employees? So, I learned how to make golf clubs. I learned how to repair them. I learned everything to do except how to hit one properly.
Do you think work ethic is ordained in us and something we're just predisposed to be and it's who we are, or do we learn work ethic? Because clearly at an early age, you were either brought into, you want something, you got to earn it. And some people I think naturally resist that because they're not workers, or I don't know. I always toy with that because I have 2 young kids, and it's like, well, wait a minute, and they're very different in wonderful ways. But I ask that question: is work ethic? Are we pre-wired that way, or do we learn it along the way?
That's a great question. I think it is nurture, right? Because I looked at my older sisters who were all working.
How much older?
10, 13, and 16 years old.
Okay,
right?
Significantly. You were an oopsies.
I was a wonderful surprise, as my mother put it. Yes. Yeah, sure.
God is good.
Last chance at an heir to the throne. That's the way I like to think about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, my parents were 40 when they had me, and they my sisters had all, by the time I was 4 years old, they were all working. Right. Some of them moved out of the house at that point,
Right.
And I saw that, and I saw them putting themselves through college and that kind of thing. But I think the question of where does the work ethic come from, it's that carrot, right? So when I'm 12, when I'm 9, I want to buy my family Christmas presents that are truly from me in my mind, right? When I'm 12, I'm going, I want that BMX bike that's the lightest, fastest bike that I can race, right? And, my parents are going, you're not getting a $500 bike in 1985, right?
Yeah. Not going to happen. Not on our dime.
Right, and I really just equated, and the beautiful thing about the paper job was the more you hustled, literally hustled, like running around, sweating, or in the snow, or but the more you hustled, the more money you made, the more people you got in front of, the more you could sell newspapers to, and I made that BMX bike. It took me 2 years to save the money, and I bought each part separately.
Oh, wow.
So there's this, I think, and work ethic sometimes comes down to either that instant gratification or the ability to see in the future that you're going to have some satisfaction that's derived from this.
Right.
If you're just doing it because you're trained to just keep on motoring with no kind of result, then it's still a hard work ethic.
Right.
But is it a good work ethic?
Yeah.
I think those are two different things.
Yeah, that's true. And I think also it's born out of necessity sometimes too. I mean, in today's day and age, clearly it's like instant gratification is just front and center. I can get anything at the click of a few buttons, not anything, but many things in life. And or just, I mean, you think about when we wanted to watch a movie, rent a movie. That was not instant. We had to get on our BMX bike or walk to the video store, rent it, and it had to be returned the next day or we'd get in trouble.
Right.
And we'd watch it over and over and over and then return it the next day. And now you literally click a button and you're watching a brand new movie.
Yeah, and the money that you needed to get to rent that movie, right? Maybe it took you a week to get the $2 or, to
X number of chores or responsibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
or X number of papers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're an East Coast boy, born and raised there. You migrated your way out west.
Yes.
At what age?
I was 18. Yeah, right after high school.
But you had a yearning to move out west at a pretty early age.
Oh, absolutely.
7 years old or something?
I was 7, and another one. I remember this story like it was yesterday, and it was my dad came home from the Super Bowl, Rams Steelers.
Oh yeah,
and I think that was I want to say 80, 81.
Okay,
but the whole thing. We was standing there in the dining room, and he was showing me pictures. The Kodak prints, right? And
so he was at the Super Bowl?
He went to the Super Bowl. My godmother's husband was PR director for the NFL, so he got to go to Super Bowls all the time, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Heaven for a big sports fan too, right? So he was in heaven. He was going all the time, and he came back from this one, and I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, Dad, why are you wearing black socks in January, right? And shorts. Right, and it was shorts was the big thing.
It looked bizarre,
right? Shorts in January was foreign. We took our shorts in September in Philadelphia and we put them in the garage and we took them back out in April or May, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, Billy, in some places of the world, it's summer all year long." I was like,
the hair on the back of your neck stood up.
It still does when I think of it, right? And I'm like, it is the most obvious. Why don't we live there?
Right.
He said, well, we got family here. I got my job here. I'm like, take the family, move it over there. Get a job over there. Like, it didn't equate to me. And from that day on, it was, they bought me back some swag, right? Like I had a pencil eraser that said California on it, had a palm tree. Palm trees, we take them for granted here. I don't. Every day when I drive, if I drive through Beverly Hills, I'm like, it's different. No better or worse. It has its weather-wise, it's much better than Philadelphia, right?
100%.
But
different.
It's such a different culture, and I didn't think about culture at that point. All I knew was I didn't like shoveling snow, and if there was somewhere where I could live where I didn't have to do that, right? And then you see on TV, you remember Chips and all these TV shows, right?
Oh yeah.
Like everybody's wearing shorts all year long, and it all clicked. Okay, that's where I need to be.
Yeah. And when you turned 18.
Turned 18, and while I went to Rhode Island first and worked at a restaurant with my two oldest sisters. We're getting their masters in Rhode Island, and they let me couch surf, right? Taught me the meaning of the word rent, right?
Yeah.
Started after a few weeks there. I was an 18-year-old boy, right?
Right.
And they were like, "Yeah, you need to learn," right? And they showed me like right out of the gate, and
it's interesting how our jobs are really, you think about before I become what I ultimately am in my career, in this case, a financial advisor, wealth manager, whichever direction you ultimately end up on. It's like everything along the way was a building block, a stepping stone, a sales experience. When I worked at the golf shop and learning how to sell a golf club or learning the math behind the scenes, everything is kind of a stepping stone towards something as I look back on it.
Yeah. I mean, anything you do can be a metaphor for the bigger picture if you look hard enough. Like I use a lot of sports analogies in the business, and I talk with some friends, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't really get that one." I was like, "Yeah, because I just made it up, right?"
Right.
but there are those bigger ones. Like certainly, like the golf shop experience was crucial, right? Because I learned not only what do you have to do to get a raise, right? How do you outperform your other cashiers, right? Like that's
not
that.
that hard to do.
But I did it, right? And it was you have to find creative ways to be better than somebody that's standing next to you,
right?
And you also have to find out, the source of the product or service you're providing, and know every aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think that gives people more confidence in either hiring you or doing business with you.
Yeah,
right.
In whatever you're doing, it's like the difference between being vacant, punching the clock, doing the time, completely vacant till I'm exiting, versus being intentional, being present. Clearly you're that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the probably the best practices in terms of out edging.
Yeah.
That specific competition.
You know what though? It's funny, Scott, because you used the term vacant. I'm a little jealous of that kind of
ability.
Yes, and
you want to call it that?
Yeah, and it's funny because we go back. We're on the third story with my dad, but I said to him, he drove the truck for the Daily News, and he became a supervisor at some point. But he was so reluctant to do it, and he was probably in his mid-50s, like shortly before he retired when he did it. And I was like, Dad, why didn't you do that sooner? You did this, the truck driving for 25 years, and then he said, Billy, when I got home from work at 2:00 in the afternoon, I could spend time with my family.
Yeah.
He's like, remember when I did the supervisor job, I had those spreadsheets, and spreadsheets back then were the things with the holes on the side, right?
Right.
And he's like, I brought my work home with me. I didn't have to do that when I was driving. My day was done.
Right.
And therein lies the whole conversation that seems to be prevalent with everybody these days of work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
So, there's vacancy in working, and then there's, overexerting yourself, right? And there's that happy place in between, I think, that we're all trying to find,
Yeah. Now, you also express yourself in jest a little bit as like this lifelong college student.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Still in.
So you were 18, right? You moved out west. You hadn't gone to college yet.
No.
So you went to college out west.
I did, yeah. Well, I got into USC.
While on a couch.
Yeah.
Kind of,
well,
right? I mean,
yeah.
While roommating.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened here. Yeah. How did you ultimately become
a lifetime student?
Well, the student, but then ultimately the journey to become the advisor in the practice you have today. That's what I want to. Let's methodically work through this here. Because your majors, I'm reading your majors. It's like there's like half a dozen here.
There was, and that was the problem.
I didn't even know you could do that. Well, I mean, I guess you could do whatever you want.
You can, and Scott, it was the problem for 20 years, and just about 3 years ago, it became the gift that gave back to me. So I got out here. My high school had a 99% college attendance rate. So I was the one. Me and my friend Max were the two that didn't go straight that fall into a college. But I got to California. I got into USC.
You were the special 1 percentile.
Yeah. I was a 1%er, but not in the good way back then.
The opposite.
Yeah. But the family didn't have the money for USC. As hard as I worked and as much money as I saved that summer, I couldn't save up the money for to go to USC. California community college system is exceptional, right? Mm-hmm. And at this point, I wrote out the check for my first semester there with my golf shop money, $6 an hour. It was $234 for the semester, the whole semester, right? I ended up, and this is one of my few flaws, I couldn't grasp the choices, right? I was never that guy that was like, hey, I want to be a professional. I don't want to be a chemist. I want to be an engineer. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a lot of interests. Journalism was one, for sure. Coming from a newspaper family, my grandfather was a journalist, and my dad worked for the newspaper. And
hard worker, that's innate in you.
Yeah, and deadlines and that kind of thing. And and my mom was very big on English. So I got into journalism. my sister was just left the Peace Corps, and she was in Africa, and I was like, hey, she's doing some interesting stuff. I changed my major to international business, blah, blah, blah. 4 years later, I'm at a 2-year school, and I'm sitting there, and I remember looking in class, and I was sitting there on my notepad writing down like my semesters, and I got good grades,
Right, right.
And I changed majors so many times of things that interested me that I had 160 units. And finally, one of my buddies was like, dude, you need to go to a 4-year school and get your bachelor's degree.
Right.
So 4 years at LA Valley College, and I thought I was living.
My wife calls that like the Squirrel Syndrome.
What's that?
Where it's like, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And on my way to the next stop, I run into 3 or 4 things along the way, and I'm stopped and I'm distracted. Oh, it's a new this. Oh, it's a new that. And your education was kind of like that.
Yeah.
Do you still deal with that today?
Yes.
Or how have you dealt with that?
Well, in some capacity, I think back then, you got to think I was in an all-boys Jesuit high school.
Okay.
In Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah.
So
getting out west and in California and college and the whole scene.
Yeah. You're going to a California college. There's girls wearing bikinis in class.
Right.
And
that's hard to focus.
And the sun's out in January. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So the curriculum too, you can pick your own.
You had to take time to acclimate.
Oh yeah.
Everyone would. I mean, that's important.
4 years is a long time, but
true.
It worked. I'm still acclimating.
I'm not talking 4 weeks or 4 months, 4 years.
I'm still acclimating.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the charm of this place.
I think that's so exciting.
It is. When you wake up and you go, you think about vacations, like I live in a vacation.
Yeah.
I got to work, but
right.
If you perceive it,
that's a great mindset.
Yeah. Do what you love, right? But every day is just, it could be a vacation day.
Yeah.
If you just look out your window,
100%.
if you live where you want to.
Yeah. Okay, so your buddy was like, "You got to get to a 4-year university, man. It's time."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So then what?
We're going to move down to Redondo Beach, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" I can't afford to live there. We got in this great situation where there was 3 of us in this big house, and I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I went into the.
Me too.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
Get out of here!
I graduated with the business administration degree of finance. That was my. But I would in the opposite. I had a pretty unique home situation where my mom wasn't the healthiest of people, and so I kind of had to maintain some home time and be pretty much close to her. So I commuted. I worked and then commuted to Long Beach State. It's just up the road.
Oh, nice.
Because I was in Huntington at the time. But I was always in the mindset, like from 8th grade on, it was like, I want to be what I was a stockbroker. That's what I called it. I want to sell, which I didn't know, be in financial services. And so, finance, go dirtbags.
Yeah. 49ers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. When did
Good for you.
Can I ask when did you graduate?
Yeah, 2001 I graduated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were the ladies volleyball team was state or national champions at that point.
And baseball was doing really well at the time, and of course our basketball team was been competitive.
Yeah.
Off and on. Yeah. It was a great school. I really loved going there. I wish I would have had the real experience where I didn't have to be quote unquote at home, but it is what it is.
I'm with you.
No regrets.
Same. Really though, because I still think about it to this day. I never lived on campus, right? So I went to Long Beach and I commuted from Long Beach. I lived in Redondo, went to Long Beach. I mean, I was still working at Chatsworth at the golf shop at the first semester. That was a nightmare. Redondo, Chatsworth, but I wonder.
So you were working. You were working.
Oh yeah.
Commuting.
Working, paying rent, and
same with me. I guess I say I no regrets because. Well, we're here today as an example, and it's like I think everything is a result of your journey along the way, and I think my journey is what put me, having this conversation here today, and the role that I'm in today, and the life that I live today. And so for that, I look back and I say, of course, I wish I would have had that college experience and been able to go to Northern California and live in a dorm room with the dudes. And,
right. But then, that's a good point, Scott, because, and going back to the original.
I'm at peace.
Yeah.
is a better way to put it,
Yeah.
And I'm sure you are too.
I am. And I thank God for, my family who told me, hey, you could go to USC, live in a dorm. Mom and Dad could afford a year or two. But then what kind of pressure does that put on you? Mm-hmm. And you're 18. Mm-hmm. Come on. Really? Yeah. Are you going to get straight A's at USC, being in a dorm room, after being in an all-boys high school, suit and tie on in the snow all day?
Right.
You got to give yourself, or you got to at least listen to those people that know you better than you do when you're at that immature age. Yeah. Right? And who knows? Who knows what would have happened, right?
That's interesting because I applied to, I went to a 2-year junior college here, and then I applied to San Diego State, Cal State Long Beach, Fullerton, and USC. I was accepted at all 4.
Oh, yeah?
And at first it was like, oh, I'm doing USC. And then I'm looking at and my mom was a private school teacher. There was no capital, no money to pay for it. So I was going to have to take student loans and figure this out. And at the end of the day, I made the same decision of like, if money was no object, yeah, I would have done it. But money is a real object, and I don't have the means, and so therefore I feel as though I'll get an equitable education by going to Long Beach and put myself through college. And similar path. That's interesting.
It is. I think we're better people for it, right?
Kudos. Cheers to you.
Yeah, right.
Boom.
Go Niners.
That's right. All right. So you went to college.
Yeah, I walked in the counseling office. I said, look, I got 160 units. What gets me out of here with a bachelor's degree, right? In the business school, right? I obviously wasn't going to go the chemistry route because I had journalism, a little bit of philosophy, psychology, and international business. And they said human resources or marketing. I was eating, meeny, mighty, mo. Human resources, fine. Turned out to be a good move because I learned a lot about what makes a company work. And in 98, I walked with an empty diploma, right? So the family came out. Billy graduated from college and all that, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, there's nothing in here. I was like, whatever, right? 6 years in college, I figured I graduated. I got a cap and gown to prove it. I got pictures. So like about 5 years later, I got a letter that said you missed History 101. And anyway, so I ended up having to go back.
Okay, you did that.
Right. So when I went back, and I'm skipping forward for the financial services businesses in between here, I'd already gotten a job in financial services, and I was like, but my mom was like, do you have that piece of paper? Your sisters have that piece of paper. Do you have that piece of paper?
You need that.
Oh, God, right? So when I went back and got the piece of paper, turns out, I missed an AP class in high school by 1 point, and that's why the history didn't count or something. I had to take a bunch of it over again. But then I went to the counseling office and I said, look, bucket list item. I'm doing well now. I'm older. I always wanted to get a degree in philosophy. And they're like, well, you took all these classes in the early 90s. All those classes that I thought were hodgepodge and didn't really count towards anything specific. I went, okay, I did learn things in there. I got good grades in there. And now all I have to do is take a couple more classes in that same subject and I'll get another degree in that, another degree in that, another degree in that. And so that's kind of how that came about. Like,
wow, you piece it all together.
I think it came together for me, right? Everything happens for a reason, right? Yeah. And I think I did have a little bit of that regret, like, did I waste time, taking these classes and whatever? But then I found in my business, right, like, oh, wow, behavioral science.
Huge.
Absolutely.
And I'm so enamored by it. So intrigued by behavioral finance and the psychology as associated to people making financial decisions, the fear versus greed, emotional, that whole aspect of that is, and it's so prevalent today, even more so, just because the age of information is constant. So how do we decipher and interpret good knowledge or good intel, bad intel, which direction, who's trustworthy, who's not? How do we process all of this? It's so much more complicated than when it was in the 80s or 90s.
It is, and I don't know of anybody except for personal psychologists or therapists that are addressing it with people. People aren't realizing it, right? And we know because we're in the business, we think, oh, there's fear and greed are the two motivators, right? A lot of times when you tell that to a client, it's new information to them.
Yeah.
Right? They don't realize that they're seeing these headlines saying, great headline I saw a few years ago, and it really stuck with me. Dow off intraday lows.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm at the locker room at the gym. 5 guys stop and went, oh, geez. And I'm like, what are they thinking? The wording is off intraday. They're not really sure what that means, right? And lows. This is a bad thing.
Yeah.
What it's saying is the Dow Jones, these 30 stocks, are higher than they were at the lowest point that they were at the day.
Right. It's not even a headline.
Right.
Because it's constantly pinging back and forth every day.
Yeah.
Every market hour.
Yeah, but that's the fear and greed, right? And
100%.
Fear.
And playing into that.
Yeah. Fear is more powerful than greed too, right? But yeah, I don't think enough people are addressing it. And, in our business, I think we all know it, but it's a tough conversation, I think, to have with a lot of people, because it takes an admission of you're being duped, right?
Yeah.
Or you feel like, he's telling me that I don't know what's up.
Right.
Right. No, we just want to get you to realize through the behavioral science aspect of our business that you're told things to grab your attention.
Right.
The facts may be relevant to that, or you could relate them to that, but you really have to do a little bit more digging and find trusted professionals as opposed to just kind of what you're being fed.
Right. It's also too like you studied it, not necessarily. I mean, maybe now recently you've studied more behavioral finance, but you studied psychology and philosophy and all of that.
Right.
Have you found any good books, not textbooks, but good informational content on the topic of behavioral finance? Have you come across anything? I've seen some, but nothing and I've read some, but nothing that's like, wow, this is a really good book on the topic of behavioral finance.
Yeah, no,
it's a challenging place.
It is. I don't. And there have been a few good books on it. Nothing stands out though, because for me, when I read something that's psychology or philosophy, because I've been in this business 20 some years, right? I already equate, as I'm reading it, I'm absorbing it and relating it to my business, right? I'm relating it to my personal life and my business at the same time. So yeah, I can't think of any specific like
behavioral finance books. Yeah,
no.
I'm on a journey to find some. Maybe we can write one day.
Yeah, right.
That would be a good thing.
I'm working on a book on efficiency now, and it's going to be related loosely to the behavioral finance, but it's more about just being optimized.
There you go.
There you go.
So you're still a student. You are currently studying your MBA.
Yes.
With the Harvard program.
Correct. Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. COVID.
How did that happen? How does one apply? I mean, I don't even know. How do you become a Harvard student?
Well,
what's that look like?
A friend of mine that I worked with at the golf shop 30 years ago, right?
Seriously?
Yeah, we've been in touch ever since. And she said, hey, my buddy, she's like, I know you're, kind of a lifetime student and whatever. And I'm a fan of just doing things that are obscure and seemingly, I don't want to say unattainable, right? But
I would say like you're on the peripheral.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I want to be a little bit on the edge and a little outside the box. And
you put it so eloquently, Scott. I would just say goofy, right? Like I was at a Frisbee tournament, I often go to places where where I don't belong. You know what I mean? Like we played a volleyball tournament a couple weeks ago, beach volleyball tournament. I've been playing for a few years, but I'm not like at that level, right?
Right. You wouldn't classify yourself as a gamer yet?
No.
Right, okay.
If you're gonna have me, if you'll let me in, I'm going. Right? I joined the Moose Lodge, the Elks Lodge, and I'm like, you're not.
You do have the hair and the height
for the beach volleyball.
Yeah.
I had a couple good shots.
Okay, we digress. Harvard.
Yeah, so
let's get serious.
Yeah, my friend texted me and she said, "Hey, I know you've been thinking about, I got the bachelor's degree, I got the piece of paper. Hey, I know you've been thinking about it. They have a program online. It was during COVID, and they said if you take X amount of classes, and get an A in them or a B, then you get into the graduate program, and at this point it's still in its infancy for me.
Right.
It's not easy. Go figure.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't get easy as you get older too. Right.
It's all virtual.
Right now, yeah.
But it's classroom setting, so you actually have a virtual classroom, or is it kind of a self-study pace?
No, there's a teacher, and it's honestly, Scott, it's really time consuming.
Yeah.
And I'm just doing one class a semester. I think that's all I can handle, right. for now. But we do have to take 2 on campus, which we say have to or get to, right?
Yeah.
Like that's again perception.
Because in all seriousness, your business is booming. I
Yes.
mean, it's growing rapidly.
Thanks to you.
Yeah, well, in
large part.
very small part.
Large
In very,
part.
very small
Yes.
part. It's a good partnership.
Yeah,
And we're happy to help. So thank you for the kind words, but you are all too generous.
Thank you.
Most of it is all you and your efforts and your career.
Yeah.
But how did you become, tell me about your journey. How did your practice start as a financial advisor? Just a trader? What was it?
Payne Weber, tech boom. And I had a buddy.
Oh my goodness. So that was what year?
98.
Oh yeah. So you were on fire the first 12 months.
Scott, it was the day, it was September 8th, 1998 was my first day. And I still have a, they used to laminate the stuff, like the whatever called the pieces, the advertising piece, marketing pieces,
Yeah.
right? And it had the San Francisco Chronicle on the front, and you flipped it over to the San Francisco Examiner. And that was the one day that the market swung 300 points each way, which was huge. Then, right?
Huge.
So it was just showing how volatile the market can be and how you can get into it in the morning and go, the world's crumbling, and at the end of the day, billionaires are being made. But that was my first day. I walk into the office, Payne Weber, 100 brokers, and everybody's with the buy, sell, like even.
So no previous investment experience. You go into their training program, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah, they
Take your 7.
1,000 applicants every month, and my buddy's cousin, they gave me the math and the verbal test, right? And he was from Allentown, Pennsylvania. He kind of liked me, and he said, "You got a great phone voice, Bill." Right? Calls me up and he says, "Hey, Bill, we got the psychological test and the math test back." He's like, "You were off the charts on the math test." I was like, "Oh, that's great, Frank. Thanks, man. How did I do on the psychological test?" He's like, "Man, you really killed it on that math test." I was like, I didn't know how to take the psychological test. I was like, if you run over a squirrel and it's still alive, do you run back? I'm like, what are they looking for here? What kind of answer?
It's so random.
Right. So they started me, in the, got the 7, and then it was 300 cold calls a day, right? And
so the 300 cold calls, were the expected results from that were how many? Was it appointments or was it leads or what?
Yeah,
what was the metric there? So it was probably out of 300 calls. I mean, there's a ratio.
Right. There's an equation there somewhere, right?
30% maybe, 20% or something like that.
Yeah,
no, maybe 10.
I think
10
at
out
the
of 100.
Time it was 20% contacts, and back then telemarketing didn't have as much of a stigma as it does now, right? Most people would hang up on you, but you got 20% was contacts, and of those you could keep 5 people on the line, and then you'd get 1 appointment.
How'd you do with that?
Day.
Your personality, your mindset.
Yeah, I didn't like the scripts. I never did.
Did you do your own thing or an iteration of your? I mean, everybody does a little bit of an iteration as opposed to just verbatim.
Well, the funny thing was, I remember I had called George Harrison.
Did you really?
I don't know if it's the real George Harrison,
but his name was George Harrison.
Yeah. And so we're sitting there, and we were talking to some of the other brokers. Like, "Hey, I got George Harrison. You think it's him?" And I'm like, "Hello, George. This is John from Payne Weber. How you doing today?"
That's great.
I don't think he even picked up the phone, but I think the point I'm trying to make was, like, you could look at people's neighborhood, their names, and kind of get a feel for, like, who are you really calling here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was about being relatable, and it still is, right? If you've got someone from a completely different background and you want to connect, you find that connection. And I think moving to California, certainly the diversity here has enabled me to meet so many people and do so many different things that I think I kind of took that into the telemarketing part of it, right, of the calls. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy it. You know, it was 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, you know, right. Saturdays, and like I was just killing myself. And at one point, one of the guys was like, you know, why don't you go to a bank brokerage? I'm like, what's that? He's like, same thing you do here, except people walk in and say, hey, I've got $100,000. What do I do with it?
Right. And you work different hours.
Yeah. And you're done at 6 o'clock, you know, and and
so I did that.
Yeah, I did. I went, you know, for Payne Weber, CalFed, Citibank bought CalFed, and I was in Manhattan Beach, and then Washington Mutual. I had a partner there and 2 assistants. Washington Mutual was an eye opener for me. My partner, he was a great guy. He really had he had his business optimized. Mm-hmm. You know, like he really just
the truest sense of the word.
Yeah, we didn't leave until we had 8 appointments for the next day.
Okay.
And you know, sometimes it took us to 8 o'clock at night, but it was that same paper boy thing, right?
Yeah.
Where like, hey, you know what? If you hustle and you take a shorter lunch, you get out of here at 4.
Right.
Right? Rarely did that happen, but also we knew if you had 8 appointments a day, you made X number of gross, you made X number and Y number of net, right? And then your number for the year was, you know, and we had all these kind of little rewards in place, right? Short term, like he would go once a month if we hit our number. I think our number was 86,000 GDC a month. If we hit that, he would go on a vacation the last weekend of the month, a 3-day vacation, take a Monday off, you know, like, and I think it's important because, especially in this business, you can get burnout real quick.
Real quick.
Yeah.
And to have those ongoing little motivators and incentivized trinkets, if you want to call it that, keeps you moving.
Yeah.
So today, we know we're no longer with WAMU.
Well, I moved.
That's gone.
Yeah. I got the call. I moved out of that partnership. The position opened up on Sunset Boulevard. And, you know, again, I was a rocker from Philly, right? Like in high school, I was one of the metalheads, you know, in a all boys prep school, but But you know, it never left me, even though the hair got cut shortly.
Well, you just got closer to it out in L.A., you know.
Yeah, well, that was the thing.
Got the chance to meet your idol, Van Halen.
Right, I met him at the golf shop. Go figure, right? Like, and it was amazing. It's been amazing. It continues to, like, every day. I mean, just last week, you know, I met a few people that I never thought I'd, you know, shake hands with, you know, and it's. You know, and from day one, right, it's been like that for me. But the Sunset Strip Chase branch opened up, and I said, JP, you know, well, it was WAMU then, and then I said, okay, Sunset Strip, fine. And then Chase bought them, and then, it was 10 years there. I couldn't leave.
Oh, you were there 10 years?
Yeah, I couldn't.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't leave. Same branch, and it was just, you know, I went through a branch manager every 2 years. You know, must have been 200 different tellers and bankers that, you know, I got accustomed to, became friends with, still friends to this day with some of them. But that was where I would say, you know, well, it's half my career was spent at that branch, you know.
Right.
You know.
And so many of your clients today, I mean, you probably have had the opportunity to meet wonderful and, very unique and, you know.
Wonderful, unique, eclectic.
Thank you for these different
That's one of the words, the euphemisms that we use. Yeah, they've all, I mean.
Who was one of the most interesting people you've met out of Hollywood, L.A.? Or there's a few?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, you know, respecting clients.
All in a very good and positive way, but like interesting people. Oh, yeah, that's true. I guess client privilege.
Well, yeah, the owner of the Whiskey A Go Go and the Rainbow. And
oh yeah,
rest of his soul. He passed a few years ago, but he came into the branch and he had a hat that said Rainbow Bar and Grill, and I was like, you know, who's this old guy?
Right.
You know, like, and he wanted to talk about his account. I didn't know I had his account, right? And I was like, oh, I love that place. You know, that's like rock and roll mecca. You know, I was like, you go there a lot? And he's like, I own that shit.
Oh wow.
Like, okay. Next thing you know, I mean, this guy, you know, he's owned the whiskey since 1967, right? And like, I would just sit in his office, Scott, I mean, for whenever he'd let me, right? And he'd often say, like, oh, don't you have to go back to work? I don't want to bore you anymore. I'm like, tell me more about Janis.
Everything.
Tell me more about Jim Morrison, right? Like, tell me the stories. And I'm sitting on the sofa that Robert Plant and Jimmy Page sat on. Like, and I'm fascinated. But, everything from that kind of like rock and roll glory to the entertainment, the movies and TV and some of those stars. I mean, they're just their mindset is fascinating to me more than anything, more than their accomplishments. Right. Is the gumption to do what they've done and take that risk with their lives and have no kind of real backup sometimes.
Right.
Even more fascinating is
it's like failure is not an option. This is it. This is all I got.
Right.
Yeah.
But even more fascinating than the ones that succeeded greatly are the ones that got to do what they loved within those industries. Like the studio musician, there was Gas House Dave Shorey was another client that passed away, and he was a studio musician. Mm-hmm. He loved playing guitar. He's been doing it since he didn't know anything else. And he played on he played at the Baked Potato, like an incredible blues musician in his own right, but he was also the guitarist on Britney Spears' album, right? Like at the same time.
Yeah.
But the look in his eye when he was talking about working with Britney Spears, it wasn't, hey, I get to work with Britney Spears. Like these people don't care about the fascination of the stardom, right?
Just music.
Yeah. Right.
They love music and being in music, and
exactly.
He found his space within a huge world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a lot of people don't you don't have to be in the limelight to have a wonderful journey in music.
Yeah.
Right?
You don't need a Grammy to make a living.
Right.
Either at doing that. And it didn't ever occur to me as a teenager, right? Like you see, okay, there's, Eddie Van Halen and there's, 17 other guitarists that are making the money.
Yeah. There's
1,700 other ones. For every one of those, there's 100 other ones that are still making a good living.
Right.
And still doing what they love.
Yeah. So today what does your practice look like? Is it a lot of entertainers, musicians? Is it business people? What's the makeup of your practice today? And how has it evolved over the years? I mean, you've been doing this now, 2 decades?
Well, 23 years in September, right? So often in this business, our client demographic follows where our branch is located, right?
Right.
So Manhattan Beach for 5 years, it was mostly Manhattan Beach people. Then San Pedro for 2 years, right, with WAMU and the partnership, and that was a different clientele, vastly different, right? And every place I was at, I took people along with me, the people that I brought joy to, and the people that brought me joy, right? Sunset, and once Chase took over, the clientele it became almost too much, right? There was a lot. I had a lot of clients, right? Because it was always
you were right there,
churning, right? And
great branch.
Oh, it was. It really was. I think they just tore it down like recently.
No.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I left there too was because of the architects. They were tearing down that whole corner. Oh. Yeah. So, but the clients that went in there, it was everything from all the stories you hear from other advisors in the business of that that homeless person that has $3 million to that A-list celebrity, right, or the B-list celebrity or the C-list celebrity, right, and it was really at that branch I think that I got all these clients, and then when I went independent 3 years ago. I took again those people that I brought joy to and that bring me joy.
Yeah.
And so right now the mix is it really still is as diverse as it was the past 15 years.
And is your the revenue model more advisory, commission, a combination of both? What's the makeup now?
The revenue model it's about 75% advisory now.
Okay.
It's a good question for me because I really try not to look at it. I'm the weirdest advisor, Scott, in that I try not to look at my commission runs.
Right.
I try not to look at my the pie chart, where We do, because we all want to know those numbers, right?
Right.
But I kind of don't, because what it does for me is when I'm sitting down with a client, I'm not thinking about that pie chart of how does this fit in my business mix. What do you need?
Right.
Right. What does the client's family need?
What are your hopes and dreams? How do I help you retire with dignity? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And you speak to that here in your bio, and that's your why.
Yeah, that's it. And that's, I'm sitting in front of them to make their financial dreams come true, and thus their personal dreams a lot of times, right?
Right.
Because if your dream is to go, is to retire at 55 and go skydiving, well, you're going to need money to do that, right?
Right.
And you're going to need financial planning to do that, So it's always been the mix really changed. I mean, managed money. I was a late comer to that game.
Right.
I didn't, frankly, at Payne Weber, when it was kind of just first starting, I didn't believe in it at all.
Right. It was just make your transactions. Right. That's the way it worked.
Yeah, and I think it was, and the regulatory environment hadn't caught up at that point, right? Mm-hmm. Because the regulators didn't see the Merrill Lynch's and Payne Weber even. The proprietary product aspect of selling, right? So that was back when you'd have a managed account, right? And 50% of the funds in that managed account were from the company that was issuing the managed account.
Right.
That's changed quite a bit over the years, obviously for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but now as an independent advisor, I could put any company's funds, individual stocks in there. So I love it now when it's the right thing.
Yeah.
I do quite a bit of variable annuities, life insurance, of course, right? But I keep the mix pretty simple. These last, I'll say 15 months, right? I've seen my value with clients in consulting the numbers, not with their IRA or their life insurance or whatever. It's hey, Bill, I want to refinance my home. How do I do this, right? And it's not so much about like, hey, you need a broker here. It's like, okay, do you want a 30-year fix? Do you want an interest only? Or what's that going to do for you? Right? And it's going back to the behavioral science. And it's fascinating to me because every time I do a review with somebody, 95% of the time we spend is talking not about the performance of last year, right? It's talking about what they want to do, what their money scripts are, right? Of, hey, what they've been told. I've been told, Bill, I want to have my house free and clear.
Let's talk about that. Like that's what you say. And
why do you think that, right? Well, debt's bad. That's a big statement, right?
Right.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Well, it is in my life. What does that mean? And a lot of people don't like to get philosophical, but I like to listen to people's silent listening to themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you say something, if you question something that they just told you, like, well, I was always told debt is bad. Tell me why you believe that.
Right.
You were told that, but why do you believe that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and everybody's got a different story,
So I want to transition as well to talk about, your marketing engine and your marketing strategy, your marketing plan. I would imagine you get a significant amount of clients through just word of mouth at this point and introductions. But is there anything that you're doing in addition to that, specifically that's helping to drive client acquisition?
Great question. No. Nothing, Scott. It's
That's a great place to be.
It's
really affirmation
is.
For the great job that you're doing. Kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think it feels like that, right? Because what I've been doing, for the past year, I don't want any more clients than I can't take care of, obviously, right? So, we've talked before about that staffing problem, right? You got to hire more people if you get more people and that kind of thing. So
how many households do you advise now?
It's almost exactly 100.
Okay.
Right? So
that's great.
So I went from 700 at Chase, right, down to 100, right? And But you take that deeper dive, you're doing 7 times more work for those people than you did, right? And you're
like helping them refinance their house.
Yeah, much more involved in their lives, right? If they want to go and look at buying a new car, you're looking up Kelley Blue Book with them. You're with them, right? You're part of their team and family. Whereas before, you were the financial advisor that worked at the bank,
transactional, purely,
right? And I still cared more than the next guy there, but. Now I have the time and resources to do it. So marketing-wise, I just haven't. We've got our podcast, Dollars and Sensibilities. We put that out there, and I think that gives the existing clients and maybe some of their friends, like, hey, this is the guy that does my finances, right? And we try to make our podcast not specific to our clients, right? Because obviously Andrew and I have different demographics in terms of clients. So, I think from now to the end of the year, I'm thinking honestly, Scott, I'm thinking go big, some billboards, right? I've just done some preliminary talks on how to do that, and maybe a couple spots on TV. I've talked to this PR firm, and I don't know that the social media marketing is going to get me those new clients that I want. Also, I'm not sure, like you said, it's a great place to be, that there's new clients that I need.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I much rather, I sat with somebody this week that I've been managing the family's money, different parts of the family for 20 years, right? And a guy says to me, hey, now we have this, right? I would love to have just, a dozen families, right? And I get such a kick out of it. You got the kids and the grandkids, and then, my assistant, Deanna, is the daughter. I opened her 529 plan 16 years ago with her father.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's growing your practice, and it truly is like a family practice. Like, when you and I went to the doctor when we were younger, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't the same as it is today, right?
Yeah.
The doctor, he lived a few blocks away, and he knew my father, like that. I think people find more comfort in that, and it's already hard enough, right, to deal with finances, especially if you're not a financial person. It's already hard enough to kind of just pull out the calculator and address that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, marketing wise, I just think raising the credibility level, raising the brand, right. So the logo, I've changed the name a little bit, right? And so, and that incorporation, want to alleviate any confusion, right? And just want to instill confidence in the clients that I have now. If there's any lacking, right, address that, and then have them, which they're already doing, right, organically, and I'm not even asking for it. I haven't asked for a referral in years. And
so is your vision of success over however many 3 to 5 years, is it really to move more towards working with a dozen families and being that, or is it 100 to 150 or even more? It's an interesting place to be as an advisor. We have 2 paths we can go on. One is an income producer. And I could be the best income producer that I can be, which is what you really are now, or I could be a business builder. A business builder means I'm really removing myself as the direct advisor, and now I've got advisors under me, I've got staff, the brand really lives on beyond me. An income producer is, if I'm gone, then there's a significant reduction in capacity to actually facilitate client relationships, amongst many other things. So right now you're very successful, and your practice is very successful as an income producing firm, if you will.
Sure.
Because that's your main role.
Right.
Do you think that's the path you want to continue on? It's just reshape what that looks like? Or is it, no, I really want to build a true business with staff and build this whole thing out? Because that's a whole different thing. Now you're not dealing really at all with clients.
Right. That's it. Like, that's the big picture is what you're asking, right? And I've thought about it, of course. The 100 that I have right now, they're my family, and that's it for life. As much as I can expand within those 100 households, I don't see retirement. Like I don't think about that. Like what the hell am I going to do? Right. Like this is what I'm good at, you know? So, and this is what brings me joy. I think.
So you're the person who's saying, I'm going to do this until I'm dead.
Yeah. And
it's my journey. It's my passion. It's my life. And that's a right answer, you know?
Yeah. And I think in terms of like how to keep the income coming in as a firm and things like that, it goes back to the work ethic.
Yeah.
If you put in the work, you don't even have to pay attention to those numbers. What's your product mix, whatever. You can go back and analyze that so you're blue in the face. To me, I just wasted 45 minutes. If I'm looking at what I did last month, I'm not doing this month. Right.
Yeah.
So I just look at it. You put in the hours. For me, it's the challenge is how to make those hours enjoyable, right? How to make the interactions with the clients enjoyable. You know, the new office and the branding and those things, they all add to that kind of joy. You know, I get deeply affected when I have, clients pass away. Mm-hmm. There's no way around that, right? But looking at the business as a whole, I don't worry about, am I going to double my AUM in the next 3 or 4 years, right? It'll happen if it's supposed to happen. I mean,
you just love working with people.
Yeah, and the money follows.
Right.
I'm somebody famous, I'm sure, said it. Do what you want and do what you love, and the money will follow.
Right.
Scott, it's been like doubled one year, tripled the next, and it's increased every year, and maybe not directly proportional to the number of hours that I put in, but certainly I put in just as many hours now as I did back at Payne Weber making 300 cold calls. The difference is I get to sit here with you and discuss how we're going to grow the business, right? And then go back to my clients and grow the business that way. And, it's not, petitioning strangers to buy bonds from Bank of Happily, at 8%.
Life is good, isn't it?
It is. Life is great.
Thank you so much for coming in.
This
has been a ton of fun.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You are an interesting man. It's been fun. Till next time. That's a promise, right?
Yes.
All right, good.
Right
Bill McBride.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care.
Cheers.